My sister, Audrey, was a woman of fierce pride, always claiming she would rather die than surrender. Years ago, when our mother was lying in a hospital bed, her life hanging by a thread while medical bills piled up like mountains, billionaire CEO Ethan Vance made his move. He offered money, not out of kindness, not out of compassion. He wanted Audrey. I still remembered the hospital corridor that smelled of disinfectant and despair. Audrey stood there in her white dress, chin raised proudly, staring at Ethan as though he were something she had scraped from the bottom of her shoe. "I would rather die," she said coldly, "than become your mistress." Those words spread through our family like a curse. Ethan's expression darkened. Within months, our father's company began collapsing under a series of mysterious attacks. Investors withdrew. Contracts vanished overnight. Banks suddenly demanded repayment. Everyone knew who was behind it. Yet Audrey remained unmoved. Standing in the middle of the crumbling wreckage of our family's future, she still lifted her head proudly. "Even if it costs me my life," she declared, "I will never submit to coercion." The price of that pride came sooner than anyone expected. My father jumped from the roof of his office building. My brother Luke went to prison after taking responsibility for crimes he didn't commit. And my mother cried herself to sleep every night beside her hospital bed. Yet Audrey never once wavered. To her, principles were more important than people. Then came the kidnapping. One moment we were traveling home from a film shoot. The next, guns were pointed at our heads. We were dragged across the southern border into cartel territory, a place where laws held no power and human lives were worth less than stray animals. Even there, Audrey refused to yield. Surrounded by armed mercenaries, she stared them down fearlessly. "I'd rather rot in hell than let Ethan Vance save me," she spat. "If you've got the guts, kill me." The room fell silent. Then one of the men laughed. It wasn't amusement. It was the laugh of a predator who had found new entertainment. The kidnappers didn't admire courage. They enjoyed breaking it. Soon their threats became reality. They promised to destroy her beauty, to make an example of her, to strip away every ounce of dignity she valued so much. And when that happened, I stepped forward. I became her shield. I offered myself in her place. I endured horrors I could never fully describe, all to protect the sister I loved. At the time, I believed family meant sacrifice. I believed Audrey would never abandon me. I was wrong. When Ethan's rescue team finally tracked us down months later, Audrey made a choice. A choice that would haunt me for the rest of my life. They could only take one person. She chose herself. "If Ethan rescues Chloe too," Audrey whispered to the team, "he'll use it as leverage to force me into marriage." Her voice remained calm, cold, rational. "As long as she stays here, I still have a bargaining chip." I dropped to my knees. I grabbed her sleeve. I begged, "Please, Audrey, just call the police after you get out. Please come back for me." For a moment, I thought she might hesitate. Instead, she gently removed my fingers from her clothes. Then she walked away, without looking back. 5 years. 1,826 days. That was how long I survived in hell. Every day was a nightmare. Every night was worse. And throughout those 5 years, no rescue ever came. Not once. Not a single search party. Not a single phone call. Nothing. When I finally escaped, I was no longer human. At least, not the version of myself that had once existed. My body was covered in scars. My health was ruined. My soul had long since been crushed into dust. Yet somehow I was still breathing. And eventually, I found Audrey again. She was stepping out of a luxury limousine outside a 5-star hotel. Diamonds glittered around her neck. Designer heels clicked against the pavement. Photographers surrounded her. Reporters called her name. Mrs. Audrey Vance. The beloved wife of billionaire Ethan Vance. The woman who had supposedly suffered so much. I stood in front of her like a ghost. "Why?" I asked. My voice was barely recognizable. "Why did you leave me there?" Audrey frowned as if I were causing an inconvenience. Her gaze swept over my ruined appearance. Disgust flashed across her face. "If I had gone through what you did, Chloe, I would have killed myself." She sighed impatiently. "Honestly, are you really that afraid of death?" Something inside me snapped. Years of pain erupted all at once. Afraid of death? My entire body trembled. "If I hadn't taken your place, you would have been dead years ago." I screamed so loudly my throat tore. "How dare you say that to me?" Yet Audrey only looked confused. Genuinely confused. as though she couldn't understand my anger at all. "Don't be ridiculous," she said. A faint smile appeared on her lips. "I'm the heroine." The words hit me harder than any weapon. "What?" "I'm the main character of the story," Audrey replied matter-of-factly. "Nothing can happen to me." That was when I learned her secret. Somewhere along the way, Audrey had convinced herself she was living inside a romance novel. She believed she was the destined heroine, the woman protected by plot armor, the woman the universe itself would never allow to lose. Because of that belief, every sacrifice made by our family became acceptable. Every tragedy became necessary. Every death became someone else's problem. Then fate offered me something I never expected. A second chance. The world spun. Darkness swallowed everything. And when I opened my eyes again, I was back in that concrete cellar. Back on the day of the kidnapping. Back at the beginning of the nightmare. The sharp edge of a hunting knife rested against Audrey's cheek. The scarred cartel leader, Mac, smiled cruelly. Audrey remained as arrogant as ever. "If you're Ethan Vance's enemies," she said disdainfully, "then you've wasted your time." She closed her eyes. "I want nothing to do with him. If you have the courage, kill me." For a brief second, nobody moved. Then Max slowly licked his lips. A dangerous glint appeared in his eyes. "I've met plenty of stubborn women," he growled. "But you're something special." The knife flashed. A thin line of blood appeared on Audrey's flawless cheek. Her lashes trembled. Fear flickered across her face. But she still refused to beg. Behind Mac, several armed men exchanged uneasy glances. "Boss," one of them muttered, "what if she's really connected to someone important?" Mac barked out a harsh laugh. "In my territory?" He slammed the knife into the table. "Even a queen crawls." His gaze roamed over Audrey like a wolf studying prey. "If she can't be ransomed, we'll send her to Santa Maria. The clubs there pay top dollar for pretty faces." The room instantly grew colder. For the first time, real fear entered Audrey's eyes. She finally understood. These weren't businessmen. They weren't social elites. They weren't people who cared about wealth, reputation, or Ethan Vance's name. They were traffickers. Monsters. And monsters didn't negotiate. As several armed men stepped toward her, Audrey's confidence finally cracked. Sweat gathered on her forehead. Her lips trembled. Then her eyes found me. "Chloe." Her voice shook. A plea. A cry for help. The same plea she had once received from me. This time, I lowered my head. I curled into the dark corner of the cellar and hugged my knees tightly, making myself small, silent, helpless, exactly the way she had left me all those years ago. Late that night, I was on my knees scrubbing the marble floor of the VIP restroom when the door suddenly burst open. A woman stumbled inside. She barely made it to the toilet before collapsing over it, vomiting violently. I recognized her immediately. Sienna. Her usually flawless appearance was a mess. Mascara streaked her cheeks, and her expensive dress hung loosely from her thin frame. She looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept peacefully in months. I silently grabbed a stack of clean paper towels and handed them to her. For a moment, she stared at me. Then she accepted them. After wiping her mouth, she leaned heavily against the sink and began fixing her ruined makeup in the mirror. Only when she was certain nobody else was nearby did she speak. "Listen carefully." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "There's a guest staying in room 555 on the 5th floor. I paused. He's American. Rich. Powerful. Extremely powerful. She adjusted her lipstick with trembling fingers. Apparently the cartel grabbed him by mistake. The idiots didn't realize who he was until afterward. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. So now they're treating him like royalty while negotiating his release. My heartbeat accelerated. Sienna continued. "The Cross family is sending a private jet in 2 days. They're getting him out." She met my eyes through the mirror. "If you want to survive, convince him to take you with him." A lump formed in my throat. That wasn't information someone casually shared. In a place like this, a secret could cost you your life. Seeing my expression, Sienna rolled her eyes. "Stop looking at me like that." She turned away. "I just can't stand your sister." Her voice became colder. "That woman is a selfish, hypocritical nightmare." A faint ache settled in my chest. In my previous life, Sienna and I had become close friends. We'd comforted each other through countless sleepless nights. Shared stolen food. Shared tears. Shared hopeless dreams of escape. But eventually, the darkness consumed her. 3 years into captivity, Sienna ended her own life. Even now, remembering the news left a hollow ache inside me. I never expected her kindness to arrive this early. Yesterday, Sienna continued, while I was assigned to Audrey's floor, I overheard her talking to some clients. Her expression darkened. She was trying to recommend you. My stomach tightened. The janitor position won't protect you forever. Silence settled between us. Then I looked at her seriously. If I get out of here, I'll come back for you. For a second, something flickered across her eyes. Then she laughed. A harsh, cynical laugh. You're an idiot. She shook her head. You actually believe people still keep promises? But I did believe her. Because beneath all her sarcasm, Sienna still had a conscience. She saw pieces of herself in me. And she didn't want another woman to suffer the same fate. The clock was ticking. Audrey was actively pushing me toward disaster. And Ethan Vance would arrive within 20 days. When he came, he would save Audrey. Not me. If anything, he might punish me for failing to protect her. I needed another path. A way out. Before it was too late. 18 days later, opportunity finally arrived. I received an assignment on the 5th floor. Room 555. As I pushed my cleaning cart down the luxurious hallway, my pulse thundered in my ears. For 2 weeks, I'd replayed countless memories from my previous life. Every newspaper headline, every business scandal, every major financial event. All of it. I needed a bargaining chip powerful enough to buy my freedom. When the door opened and I saw the man sitting inside, my certainty became complete. Julian Cross, the future chairman of Cross Pharmaceuticals. A man who would one day stand toe-to-toe with Ethan Vance. Julian didn't recognize me, but I remembered him. 6 years ago, after our father's death, he'd personally visited our home. Back then, our family business was collapsing. Investors had abandoned us. Creditors circled like vultures. Julian had offered to acquire the company. His terms had been extraordinarily generous. Generous enough to save us. Yet Audrey had rejected him without hesitation. I'd rather watch the company burn, she'd said coldly, than hand it over to scavengers. I still remembered the regret in Julian's eyes as he prepared to leave. What a waste of Robert Hayes' life's work. Before departing, he gently patted my head. That memory gave me confidence now. Because unlike Audrey, Julian valued reason. And I possessed information worth millions. Perhaps billions. I inhaled slowly, then prepared to change my fate. But before I could speak, the door opened again, and Audrey was shoved into the room. The moment Hardy entered, the atmosphere changed. The cartel manager wore a polished smile as he bowed toward Julian. His tone dripped with fake politeness. He explained the unfortunate misunderstanding regarding Julian's kidnapping and assured him that a private helicopter arranged by the Cross family would arrive in 2 days. Julian listened calmly. A polite nod. Nothing more. Hardy clearly disliked the response but swallowed his irritation. Then he pushed Audrey forward. Our most distinguished guest deserves only the finest service. His grin widened. This woman is a famous actress in your country. Audrey immediately seized the opportunity. Forget the introductions. She brushed past Hardy as if she owned the room. Her eyes shone with excitement. Just tell him the ransom amount. She approached Julian and casually rested a hand on his shoulder. I'll be leaving with him. I nearly stopped breathing. Julian's eyebrow twitched. Just once. Audrey failed to notice. Instead, she launched into a dramatic performance. Tears glistened in her eyes. Her voice trembled perfectly. I've suffered so much. She sighed softly. I've always been a woman with principles. I almost laughed. If anyone else had touched me, I would have died before submitting. Julian's expression became increasingly strange. Meanwhile, Audrey continued confidently. Honestly, Julian, after everything I've endured, you're going to have to make this up to me. She pointed toward Hardy. And before we leave, I expect him kneeling and begging for forgiveness. The room fell silent. Even the guards looked stunned. I felt cold sweat trickle down my back. Audrey truly didn't understand where she was. This wasn't New York. There were no cameras, no laws, no consequences. Men like Hardy buried problems in the desert. Hardy's smile slowly widened. The expression was terrifying. You say? He asked carefully. He pointed toward Julian. He takes you. Then pointed toward himself. And I kneel. Audrey lifted her chin proudly. Obviously. The smile on Hardy's face became colder. Beside me, Julian pinched the bridge of his nose. He looked exhausted. Then things became worse. Much worse.
Audrey suddenly pointed at me.
And her. I lunged forward immediately, covering her mouth. Shut up. She bit my hand so hard I nearly cried out. Let me go. Her eyes blazed with hatred. You've always tried to steal what's mine. The accusation was so absurd I could barely process it. But Audrey was spiraling. Every sacrifice I'd ever made became proof of my jealousy in her mind. Every desperate attempt to save our family became a scheme to steal attention. The more she spoke, the more convinced she became. Finally, Julian's calm voice cut through the chaos. Hardy. The room instantly quieted. Is this really the quality of service your establishment promised? Hardy immediately understood. He wasn't stupid. One glance at Julian told him everything. The wealthy businessman wanted nothing to do with Audrey. Do you know her? Hardy asked. Julian smiled faintly. Not particularly. Audrey froze. Julian continued smoothly. We met once during a business discussion years ago. His expression remained pleasant. But rescuing someone from this establishment is expensive. He shrugged. I'm afraid my budget doesn't include additional passengers. The rejection was absolute. Audrey's face turned white.
No.
She stared at him. No, that's impossible. Her voice cracked. You fell in love with me years ago. I nearly choked. Even Hardy looked confused. Julian simply blinked. Audrey rushed forward desperately. You've been secretly watching me. Still silence. I know why you're acting cold. Nothing. Then Julian finally spoke. Miss Audrey. His tone became sharp. Please retain some self-respect. The word struck harder than any slap. Audrey looked shattered. Then panic took over. She began screaming, threatening, insulting, desperately trying to regain control. When the guards dragged her toward the door, she revealed her final card. The patents. Everyone paused. I have access to the Hayes family biomedical patents. For the first time, genuine interest flickered in Julian's eyes. But it disappeared just as quickly. Because Audrey kept talking.
And talking.
And ruining everything. By the time she was dragged from the room, every ounce of credibility she possessed had vanished. The hallway echoed with her distant screams. Then silence returned. After Audrey's departure, the room felt noticeably colder. Julian studied me carefully. Miss Chloe. His voice was polite. But if you're planning to continue where your sister left off, don't bother. I wasn't surprised. Audrey had nearly destroyed my credibility by association. Fortunately, I had something she didn't.
Facts.
Real leverage. I looked directly at him. Has your research center recently achieved a breakthrough in biomedical development? Julian froze. His eyes sharpened instantly. The casual businessman disappeared. A predator remained. You know about that? I nodded. What if I told you someone inside your company is conducting illegal human trials? The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Julian stood. Slowly. What did you say? I held his gaze. Every instinct screamed at me to look away. I didn't. Your brother-in-law. Silence. The teacup in Julian's hand stopped moving. Arthur. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Julian sat down. Very carefully. The shock hidden behind his calm expression was impossible to miss. I continued.
Piece by piece.
I outlined the future I remembered. The scandal. The public outrage. The lawsuits. The collapse of investor confidence. The chain reaction that would eventually destroy Cross Pharmaceuticals. Then I shifted to Ethan Vance. The acquisitions. The supply chain purchases. The hidden preparations. The trap. As I spoke, Julian's expression became increasingly serious. Finally, I reached my conclusion. Ethan isn't building partnerships. I leaned forward slightly. He's preparing to inherit everything after you fall. Silence filled the room. The kettle hissed softly nearby. My palms were damp with sweat. This was my gamble. My only chance. Then Julian suddenly smiled. A genuine smile. One filled with admiration. Chloe. It was the first time he'd used my name without formality. You are far more impressive than your sister. Relief flooded through me. But his next words hurt far more than I expected. I've visited your brother many times. My breathing stopped. So has Audrey. The room blurred. What? Julian frowned. Didn't you know? I couldn't answer. For years Audrey had insisted Luke wasn't allowed visitors. For years she'd claimed he wanted nothing to do with anyone. For years I'd believed her. Julian's voice softened. No matter how much we offered, Luke always refused. He smiled faintly. He said he was waiting. My throat tightened painfully. Waiting for who? Julian looked at me. Waiting for you. The tears I'd been holding back finally threatened to fall. Even after everything, even from prison, Luke had never given up on me. Unlike Audrey, who had abandoned me the first chance she got. And suddenly, I couldn't help wondering. How many more lies had she told? How many things had she stolen? And how much of my life had been built upon her deception? When I returned to the janitorial dormitory that evening, the atmosphere felt strangely tense. Workers whispered among themselves. Guards patrolled more frequently than usual. Even the music that normally echoed through the velvet den had fallen silent. Then the supervisor arrived. The club will be closed to guests tonight, he announced. Mandatory attendance. Everyone on the rooftop.